Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere thin-breathed and beautiful. You're walking a winding trail through the Andes where the clouds skim your hair, and each step feels like a whispered dare. The air is crisp, sharp enough to slice through your thoughts, and the earth smells like ash and ancient roots. You've been climbing for hours, maybe lifetimes. And just when you think your legs will revolt, there it is. A quiet village carved into a cliff, roofs long gone walls, sun-bleached and loyal. Welcome to the forgotten heights. Among the crumbling stones and alpine grasses, something glints. Not gold, not bone. It's a spoon. Yes, a spoon, but not the kind you'd stir cereal with while doom scrolling on your phone. This one's carved from volcanic stone, black and veined like frozen thunder. Its bowl is shallow, its handle square and sturdy. Someone made this for more than soup. You turn it in your hand, noticing grooves where fingers once pinched it tight. These stone spoons show up in sites as high as 13,000 feet above sea level. That's higher than some planes cruise during short flights. Yet people lived here, cooked here, passed these tools down, like they mattered more than breath. And maybe they did. Archaeologists think they were used for mixing medicinal herbs, crushed roots, llama fat, ground insects, perhaps a whisper of coca. You imagine someone hunched over a fireless hearth, grinding a root mix for their shaman grandmother, or maybe their kid had a fever. Historians still argue whether these spoons were strictly culinary or doubled as spiritual tools, kitchen or altar. The surfaces are smoother than expected, like they were burnished with care. The Andes aren't exactly overflowing with modern polish. So how did they get this shine? One theory, brace yourself, is llama fat. It makes a surprisingly efficient polish. Just imagine explaining that to a TSA agent today. Yes, officer, it's for polishing my ceremonial cutlery. You wander further into the village. The air shifts, a wind whistling secrets past the doorway of a half-collapsed stone hut. Inside, you find more of them, different sizes, different patterns. Some have handles carved with simple geometric lines. Others bear images of animals like foxes and hummingbirds, their eyes oddly expressive for stone. And there's something charming, almost funny about it all. These are tools meant to be used, scraped, stirred, stained. But they're also art. Someone sat down, held a block of rock, and thought, let's make this beautiful. In a world where every calorie required effort, where food didn't come in drive-through bags, that act of beautifying a spoon feels a bit like magic or rebellion. And here you are, thousands of years later, cradling their creation like it's a relic, which it is. But also not. It was just a spoon, a simple object meant for simple needs. And yet somehow, it survived everything. Storms, earthquakes, pillagers, empires. You probably won't survive that long. Neither will your IKEA silverware. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now dim. The lights maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You set the spoon back on a stone shelf that no longer remembers the weight of daily life. A shelf that probably watched generations eat, love, and die beside that same hearth. Outside, the sun's sinking low, bleeding copper into the clouds. You sit for a while, feeling the chill settle into your clothes. The village is quiet, not abandoned, just resting. Somewhere nearby, the ghosts of old cooks might still be arguing over whether that root was meant to be boiled or roasted. You rise again, stepping over moss and dust. The spoon glints behind you, once more a forgotten utensil in a forgotten kitchen perched on the edge of the sky. The air grows thicker as you descend slightly into the next cluster of ruins, but the wind is still sharp enough to sting your ears. This part of the mountainside has fewer structures, more open space, as if the people who once lived here didn't mind cooking under the stars. And you're not alone. At your feet lies a collection of utensils, half buried in soil and time. They shimmer oddly under the setting sun. You crouch, brushing away dust with the back of your hand. What you find is greasy, but not gross greasy, more like permanently polished. The handles of the utensils reflect light in a way stone shouldn't. They're too smooth, too shiny, almost like someone snuck in a modern finish. But these aren't new. They're carved from dense dark wood and stone, but the surfaces gleam like marble. Welcome to the llama fat mystery. Historians believe Andean people used animal byproducts in more ways than you'd expect. Llama fat wasn't just fuel or food. It was a multi-use substance applied to leather, ceramics, even tools. And here in these utensils, it may have served as a polishing agent. You gently sniff one of the spoons, expecting something rancid. Nope. Just earth and a faint memory of ash. This polish served more than vanity. A smooth surface was easier to clean, and in the absence of modern dish soap, fat made a functional coating. Some archaeologists even claim it could have had ritual significance. Perhaps the shine itself was considered sacred. After all, if the gods live in the sun, maybe reflecting its light was a way to honor them. Historians still debate whether these tools were made to impress celestial beings or just to avoid sticky residue. You pick up what looks like a spatula, its edge slightly curved, almost surgical in precision. It feels nice, like it belongs in your hand. The kind of thing you'd flip quinoa pancakes with if you had any clue how to cook over an open flame at 12,000 feet. Nearby is a broken ladle with a chunk missing. The exposed part shows a layer of oily buildup, long hardened. That's likely where the llama fat settled. And if you're thinking, why not just use water? Keep in mind these villages existed in some of the driest high-altitude zones on Earth. Water wasn't always reliable, but llamas were. You sit beside a half-wall and imagine an elder teaching a child how to stir with that very spoon. Use the flat side, they'd probably say in Quechua, or an even older dialect. And don't waste a drop. You think quinoa stirs itself. You smile. Some things never change. One of the quirkiest utensils you find isn't even stone or wood. It's part of a hardened animal horn, polished on one side and flat on the other. A scraping tool. A butter spreader. No one really knows, but it's been sharpened at the edge with a strange crosshatch pattern, like tiny grooves for grip. Some believe these patterns held symbolic meaning. Others argue they were purely practical, maybe both, maybe neither. Maybe someone was just bored and doodling. And here's a fun twist. The presence of alpaca or llama fat doesn't only show up in cooking tools. Some of it's been detected in ceremonial masks, cosmetics, even textile looms. It was everywhere like the olive oil of the Andes, but fluffier. You lean back, watching clouds crawl slowly across the sky. The silence here is not quite silent. There's the distant whistle of wind, the occasional crackle of settling stones. And if you let your mind drift, the soft clatter of ancient utensils long vanished, but echoing in the rhythm of the mountain. Your own stomach growls. It's easy to forget how hungry old places can make you feel. Something about all this imagining, the meals, the scents, the textures, pulls you in deeper than any museum exhibit ever could. These weren't people on display. They lived, bickered, burned their stews, and polished their spoons with llama grease. Because that's what you did when you had no Teflon. You lift one last tool, a thin stirring stick, no longer than your forearm smoothed into a taper. It might have been used for stirring sauces, or maybe paints, or maybe a little bit of both. When you're carving your tools by hand, you don't waste them on single-purpose chores. The sun is dipping now, casting long shadows from broken door frames. You place the shiny spoon back where you found it, careful not to disturb the story it's still telling. You stand slowly, bones a little a-cheer than they were an hour ago, but heart a little fuller. Another gust of wind swirls through the camp, and you swear you hear a chuckle in it. Maybe someone from long ago, amused that you spent so much time admiring a spoon rubbed with llama fat. But then again, they'd probably admire your devotion. After all, it's not about what the tool is made of. It's what survives. You wake with a shiver and the strange sense that someone just offered you breakfast. But the fire's long out, and the only sound is a breeze whispering through stone walls and dry grass. You stretch, rubbing a crick from your neck, and begin picking your way down a sun-warmed slope toward the next ruins. Here the ground flattens into terraces, broad steps carved into the mountain, still lined with the ghosts of gardens. You can almost smell cooked grain in the air, warm and nutty. At the center of one terrace sits a ring of stones, what was once a kitchen or maybe a gathering space, and scattered around it are the remains of tools you'd never expect to find at 11,000 feet above sea level. You pick one up, a delicate steamer basket, or at least what's left of it. The weave is brittle now, but you can still trace the fine pattern of the reeds crisscrossed with surprising precision. Yes, that's right, steaming baskets. Thousands of years before bamboo steamers filled your favorite dumpling shop, Andean cooks were using similar techniques with totally different materials. They wove them from local reeds, barks, and sometimes thin twigs, layering them in earthen ovens or placing them over ceramic pots. Underneath, they'd simmer water or broth, and above quinoa cakes, not the fluffy kind you might imagine in a modern cafe, with pumpkin seeds and artisan labels. These were dense, hearty patties, often mixed with mashed tubers, wild herbs, and sometimes insects. Protein was hard-won at these altitudes, and every bite had to count. There are traces of these cakes found fossilized in hearth ashes, the grains compacted into little discs like ancient granola cookies. You examine the basket again. It's small, handheld, with a flattened base and tiny finger loops at the edge. Designed for speed, for moving quickly between pots, maybe passing from one cook to another. Some of them even had lids, though those rarely survived. And occasionally they'd smear clay along the woven strands to make the baskets more durable, like ancient non-stick coating. Here's a twist: some of these steaming baskets have been found in burial sites. And not just any burial sites, elite tombs. Historians still argue whether this means the humble steamer had ceremonial status, or if elite families just really loved their quinoa. You notice another tool nearby, half buried in packed soil. It's a reed scoop, curved like a ladle but shallower and burnt at the tip. You imagine it being used to lift the cakes out once they were ready. Someone would test the edge with a calloused finger, feel the steam rise, and carefully flip the patty with practiced ease. No spatulas here, just rhythm and intuition. Andean kitchens weren't places of haste. They were built for patience, for the careful layering of ingredients, steam, and time. You picture 3 or 4 generations gathered in the same space, elders squatting near the fire, children grinding grain, and someone outside picking herbs grown between the terraces. Every meal was a slow choreography. Even the structure of the terraces around you whispers this. They weren't just for agriculture. These levels helped manage temperature and airflow. Cooking at high altitude is tricky. Water boils at lower temperatures and fires burn unpredictable in the wind. So they use the land itself, digging fire pits below windbreaks, placing hot stones in the earth, even trapping heat under layers of reeds and dirt. And just for fun, one fringe theory suggests some of these steamer designs were inspired by spiders' webs. There are oral traditions among a few mountain communities that link cooking patterns to animal spirits. The weavings, they say, were taught to early people by the spider goddess who cooked for the stars. Could be myth, could be metaphor, or it could be someone just really admired arachnids. You pick up one last fragment, a tiny charm carved like a steamer basket no bigger than your thumb. It has a hole bored into the top as if meant to hang from a necklace. A cook's talisman, maybe, or a status symbol. Historians are still scratching their heads over these. You tuck it gently back into the earth. Before you leave, you sit near the hearth, where the stones are still warm from the day. You close your eyes and breathe. There's no smoke anymore, no grain, no chatter. But in your mind, the kitchen hums back to life. A spoon stirs. The basket rises dripping with steam. And someone laughs in a language that no longer echoes here. You open your eyes to the pink wash of evening. The wind tickles your cheeks as if reminding you dinner's long over. But the memory of the meal that lingers, the sky darkens to velvet as you walk further along the mountain ridge, your fingers trailing over time-smoothed stone. You pause when you see a shape that doesn't belong, rounded, curved, almost comically oversized. Nestled in a divot of earth is a gourd, or at least half of one. It's dry and hollow, cracked down the side, but unmistakable. You pick it up, gently surprised by how light it feels. This isn't just a container. This is a weapon. Yes, welcome to the world of gourd ladles of war. Back when the Inca Empire was still sketching out its borders and highland tribes defended their terraces with teeth and tactics, everyday objects pulled double duty. And in many Andean cultures, the gourd wasn't just for scooping stew. In the chaos of battle, or even a petty feud between neighboring families, these utensils could be slung like stones. Some were even reinforced with resin to make them harder, less of a ladle, more of a blunt instrument with good grip and aerodynamic flair. You tilt it in your hands, and sure enough, there's a tiny notch at the base of the handle, a finger hook. For better control, either for pouring broth or clocking someone on the side of the head. That's not to say everyone was running around with soup spoons as sidearms, but the lines between tool and weapon were often blurred. You've heard of warriors using farming sickles, of course, but in the Andes, even the kitchen drawer got involved. Some of these ladles were carved from massive gourds grown solely for utensil use. The larger the gourd, the bigger the scoop, the broader the splatter when things got heated, whether in the pot or on the battlefield. But not all of them were so rough. You spot another piece, tucked beneath a rocky outcrop. This one's smoother, more refined, with simple geometric carvings etched along the handle. A household item, yes, but it may also have been a gift. There are stories, quiet, mostly oral, of young men crafting ladles as offerings to prospective in-laws. Here, sir, take this curved gourd, and imagine me stirring soup for your daughter. Romantic, no, or practical? Maybe both. One surviving text from colonial chroniclers describes a ritual in which warriors laid down their weapons and exchanged utensils before a feast, symbolically to break bread or quinoa with the enemy. You don't need a political science degree to know nothing brings peace quite like food. You hold the ladle up to the fading light and notice tiny hairline scratches, marks of use. Someone stirred with this. Maybe a stew of purple potatoes and herbs. Maybe a meaty brew, thick with chuño, the freeze-dried potatoes you can still find in Andean markets today. You imagine the repetitive motion of stirring the weight of the ladle full the splatter if you turn too fast. It's a motion you've done yourself, but not like this. Not in air, this thin over flames fed with dried llama dung and old moss. And here's your quirky tidbit of the evening. One gourd ladle found in a high-altitude tomb was painted to resemble a feline, not sculpted, painted. Scholars think it was symbolic, perhaps meant to bring speed or power to the user, or maybe the owner just liked cats. Historians still debate whether this feline flair was religious iconography, or just the ancient equivalent of sticker bombing your water bottle. As the wind picks up again, you think about the people who use these tools. Their kitchens were more than functional. They were sanctuaries, stages, even armories. You've seen that now. A spoon isn't always just a spoon. A ladle can be an heirloom, a gift, a gesture of peace, or a swing during a family dispute. The air's thinner here, or maybe you're just getting sleepy. You lean against a low stone wall, the ladle balanced on your knee. From this height, you can see the layers of terraces cascading into shadow. Somewhere down there, once upon a time, fires glowed and broth simmered. Laughter drifted up. Stories were told. And maybe, just maybe, someone reached for a ladle and decided against the fight. You tuck the ladle gently back under the rock, resting it the way you found it. Maybe someone will find it again centuries from now and wonder why it fits so perfectly in the palm. Or maybe it'll just sit there soaking in the sun and cold content to rest after a long life of cooking and maybe clobbering. The wind whistles through narrow gullies as the stars begin to blink to life above you, scattered across the ink-black sky like ancient signals from long-dead astronomers. You follow the path of stone steps etched into the slope, deliberate, worn, inviting. And waiting for you at the top of a small platform, half sheltered by a crumbling wall, is something both delicate and absurd: a fork. Not just any fork, a feathered fork. You blink. Yep, still there. You crouch beside it, inspecting the thin handle carved from bird bone, its prongs no longer sharp, but elegantly spaced. Tied near the grip, now mostly frayed and hollowed out, is the base of a feather gray, and modeled probably from an Andean tinamou or even a condor. Either way, it wasn't built for stabbing steak. This was a tool for ceremony. Feathered utensils weren't for everyday use. These were offerings likely used by sun priests or spiritual cooks in rituals that blurred the line between food and faith. Imagine a sacred table, not unlike an altar, where offerings were delicately presented to the gods. This fork didn't lift potatoes. It lifted significance. You run a thumb along the shaft and feel where fingers once wore down the surface. just enough to feel like a fingerprint has survived. The idea of such an ephemeral thing, bird feather human gesture, offering to the sky lasting for hundreds of years, it's oddly comforting. Historians still argue whether these feathered utensils were ever used in actual food ceremonies, or if they were purely symbolic. Some say they were waved like wands, part of a performance for divine beings. Others insist they were reserved for the first bite of sacred meals, just a taste, just enough for the gods to know they were being honored. You picture a priest with sun-painted cheeks and woven robes standing in front of a fire altar, holding this fork aloft like a conductor's baton. Behind them, quinoa cakes steam. A clay pot bubbles. The village watches in hushed reverence. The fork dips once, twice, and then pauses, an offering raised to the sun. That moment, half performance, half prayer, was likely as important as the feast itself. Quirky fact time: one of the few well-preserved feathered forks was found near a burial in which the deceased had their face painted with crushed mica and bright ochre. Beside the fork, a plate with a single preserved coca leaf folded like a little green envelope. Some scholars think the leaf was meant to be the final bite offered to the gods. Others, they're still shrugging. You glance to the side and find another utensil tucked near a shattered pot. This one's stranger. It's shaped like a flat paddle carved from bone, with small feather tassels hanging from the grip. Not exactly hygienic, but undeniably stylish. These decorations were often used to signal importance, not utility. You don't toss something like this in the dish pile. It had presence. It was meant to be seen. And here's where it gets beautifully weird. In some Andean myths, the gods themselves are said to have eaten with tools of bone and feather. A few surviving stories describe moon maidens who prepared divine meals using utensils that fluttered through the air, never touching the ground. It's poetic, sure, but the level of detail in these tales makes you wonder, were these metaphors? Or did someone genuinely believe that cutlery could fly? You sit for a moment, holding the fork gently, and imagine the pride someone must have felt crafting it. The careful shaving of bone, the threading of feather into twine, the smoothing of the handle with spit and ash. Maybe it was made for a priest's initiation ceremony. Or maybe it was used only once, on the day a child was born or an ancestor was honored. Tools like this don't happen by accident. A gust of wind brushes your cheek, carrying with it the scent of dry earth and some faint hint of herbs. You swear you smell something like sage. Maybe your imagination. Or maybe, just maybe, this is one of those places where memory lingers longer than it should. You place the fork down slowly, tucking it back into its nook like a sleeping relic. The stars are sharper now, slicing into the sky above like tiny obsidian blades. You're tired, sure, but not ready to stop. There's more to see, more to feel. As you rise and step off the stone platform, you glance back once. The fork is still there, feather barely visible in the dim light. But now you know its story, or at least one version of it. That's the thing with the Andes. They don't give you answers, just whispers, and a few beautifully odd forks. Your boots crunch softly on gravel as you descend into a narrower gorge. The path coils between leaning stone walls, as if leading you into the ribcage of the mountain itself. The night is deeper now, stars thicker, and somewhere in the stillness you feel watched, not in a creepy way, just observed. Like the place remembers more than it lets on. At the base of the gorge, Lit only by your lantern's amber glow, lies a scattered cluster of utensils half buried in ash. You crouch beside them, brushing away soot. These aren't polished like the ones before. They're scarred, blunt, practical, and sharp. One in particular catches your eye, a knife, but not like the ones in your drawer. This blade is jagged, short, and obsidian black, with a hilt wrapped in woven cord. It's chipped at the edge, the kind of damage you'd expect from both slicing tubers and something tougher. Dinner prep, or something darker. In the Andes, many tools live double lives. These knives carved cassava in the morning and well cut more than vegetables at night. Ritual blades weren't uncommon. Some were reserved for animal offerings, others for human sacrifice. And yes, while that might tighten your shoulders, remember, in many ancient belief systems, sacrifice wasn't cruelty, it was currency. A way to balance cosmic books. Still, you wince. Historians still argue whether most of these blades saw violence or ceremony or both. Some think the same tool passed from generation to generation, its purpose shifting with need. A sacred knife for the priest might become a kitchen tool during peaceful seasons. Then back to something far more chilling when omens soured. You pick up another one, this one flatter, broader, like a cleaver. It's carved from stone, but the edge still holds a whisper of sharpness. It's oddly weighted, the kind of tool you'd use to crack bones or slice hard roots. And here's a fun, if unsettling fact. Tests on residues found on similar blades show traces of both plant, starch, and iron-rich fluids. That's right, veggies and blood. No wonder this tool had identity issues, but there's artistry too. You turn one over and see etched patterns on the grip lines that ripple like water or wind. Not decorative in the modern sense, but symbolic. Some think these patterns served as talismans, carved prayers for steady hands, clean cuts, or a merciful harvest. Others suggest they were identifiers marking a family's blade like a signature. You don't monogram a murder weapon, but maybe they didn't see it that way. You find a third piece, shorter, more refined. This one looks newer than the rest, well, relatively speaking. It's fashioned from copper alloy, tinged green with age, and the blade is still miraculously intact. Tools like this were rare. Metal wasn't as abundant high in the Andes, so blades like this were prized. Maybe gifted, maybe stolen. The possibilities twist in your mind like smoke. You imagine a village elder handing this knife to a daughter before her wedding. Use it, well, they might have said, for food, for family. And if the gods demand it, for duty. You shiver, but not from the cold. A little off to the side, you spot something stranger, a sheath. Or what's left of one. Woven from plant fiber hardened with resin and shaped perfectly for the copper blade. It even has a loop, probably worn around the waist or thigh. You picture a cook tying it on at dawn, ready to harvest prep and serve a feast for 50. Or a priest stepping into a sacred cave knife at the ready prayer, in mind eyes closed to what comes next. And here's your quirky fringe detail 1. Andean legend speaks of a blade forged during a lunar eclipse, cooled in chicha beer, and blessed by a mountain spirit. It was said to never dull until used in anger. After that, the edge was lost forever. Was it a myth or a warning? Historians, as you've guessed, still disagree. You sit cross-legged on the cold earth, holding one of the blades in both hands. There's a stillness to it, not ominous, just old. The weight of use hangs in the air. Meals, rituals, life, death, it's all in there, pressed into stone and metal and memory. You gently place the blade back down, aligning it with the others, as if tucking it in. A breeze stirs faint but sure, and for a heartbeat, it feels like the mountain exhales. You rise slowly, knees crackling like old wood, and as you walk away, leaving the dual-purpose knives behind, you can't help but glance over your shoulder. Not out of fear, but respect. Some tools served more than one master, and some stories, well, they cut both ways. You follow the curve of the hillside, now the path widening into a pale plateau scattered with salt crystals that catch the moonlight like sugar. The air here is different, drier, crisper, like it's been filtered through centuries. Your boots crunch over ancient crusts, and then you see it, a depression in the land, gentle but deliberate. A salt mine, abandoned but far from empty. Nestled within the edges of the mine, half exposed beneath layers of dust and mineral bloom, lies what looks like a dining set. You stop, tilt your head, and squint. Plates, cups, bowls, all preserved astonishingly well, their clay bodies kissed by salt and time. You kneel beside the largest vessel. It's a shallow cup, etched with a band of spirals around its rim. Beside it sits a taller drinking vessel, narrow-mouthed and faintly stained on the inside, as if someone just finished sipping chicha and set it down. Except that someone likely hasn't existed for over 1,000 years. Historians call these salt-dried sets. They've been found in a few highland mines, always tucked away near walls, or buried in piles of discarded silt. Some argue they were forgotten tools from salt workers' lunches. Others believe they were intentionally buried as offerings. After all, salt wasn't just seasoning, it was currency. Sacred, essential. To bury utensils in a salt mine, that's like offering your best china to a wishing well made of gold. You brush your fingers along the plate's edge. It's smoother than expected. Salt, as it turns out, is a surprisingly good preservative. It calcifies, strengthens, and with the right conditions, makes even fragile pottery last long, past its expiration date. And here's your quirky discovery of the Night One preserved salt set found in the Mara salt flats included a straw. A straw, carved from a thin reed slightly curved with a tiny bundle of llama hair, tied at the end an ancient filter. That's right. These folks were sipping drinks through eco-friendly filters long before it was cool. Historians still argue about what these sets were for. Were they utilitarian, used by workers mid-shift, or were they ceremonial, laid down as part of rituals to honor Pachamama, the Earth Mother? The truth might be both. In Andean culture, work and worship often shared a table. You explore further. A bowl with small notches carved along its rim catches your eye. Counting marks, measurement lines, or maybe decorative. You're not sure, but it feels intentional, precise, like someone used it every day and still took the time to make it beautiful. That's something you've noticed again and again tonight. Nothing was just practical. Even the most mundane tools were adorned, shaped, loved. Nearby, you find the remnants of a small grinder, 2 flat stones, one slightly concave. Salt likely wasn't the only thing crushed here. Dried herbs, roots, maybe even shells. The Andean people were masters of texture. If you've ever eaten a dish and felt like the crunch was spiritual, these were your people. And now, for the fun, slightly eerie twist, one cache of these cup sets found deep in a mine shaft was arranged in a circle around a pile of ash. Not wood ash, bone ash. Maybe a funeral rite, maybe a forgotten party. No one knows. But that image cups, raised around a pyre, stays with you. You sit down beside the collection and imagine the people who used it. Did they joke between sips of corn beer? Did they complain about the salty dust getting into everything? Did someone break a plate once and get an earful from a grandmother who swore it had been a wedding gift? It's humbling, really. We talk about ancient tools like museum pieces, but these were someone's daily companions, trusted, touched 1,000 times. You can almost hear the clink of clay cups, the low hum of conversation, the steady scrape of a spoon against the bottom of a bowl. You lean back, letting your eyes drift to the stars. The wind here is soft, almost thoughtful. It carries the scent of minerals and something vaguely metallic. You inhale deeply, and for a moment it feels like you're in two places at once now and then. Before you leave, you line up the cups, carefully, gently. Not to disturb, just to honor. You've been a guest at many forgotten tables tonight, but this one feels especially intimate, like the hosts might still be watching from the ridge, waiting for you to raise a cup in return. So you do. You lift an imaginary vessel to the dark, to the past, to the salt that preserved what time tried to erase. You whisper a thank you. Then you rise slowly and let the night swallow your footsteps. The path ahead narrows again, skimming along a ledge where the air smells faintly of smoke and copper. You pause to catch your breath and glance to the left, just in time to spot a sliver of gold half buried in gravel. Your heart skips a beat, treasure kind of, but not the dragon hoard kind. You crouch, dig gently, and lift it free. Its delicate, two tiny scissor-like arms with rounded tips. You turn it in your fingers. Tweezers, not quite. These are gold tongs, barely the length of your pinky, and they gleam even in the low light. They're too small to grab anything bulky, but perfect for something precise, like a coca leaf. These exquisite little instruments were used in sacred coca rituals. Andean priests and later high-ranking nobility used gold tongs like these to pluck single coca leaves from ceremonial bowls. They'd offer them to the gods, place them under their tongues, or pass them gently from hand to hand like leafy whispers. You imagine someone kneeling before a shrine, hands trembling slightly as they pinch a vibrant green leaf with these very tongs. The leaf was more than a stimulant. It was a link to the divine, a medicinal powerhouse, and a social glue. Coca built bridges between humans and between this world and the next. And gold. Well, in the Andes, it wasn't just valuable. Gold was the sweat of the sun, sacred and untouchable for ordinary folk. You didn't melt it into coins. You shaped it into reverence. These tongs weren't about wealth. They were about respect. You spot another set, nearby duller, less pristine. These are copper, same shape, but greenish with age, nicked at the tips. Perhaps used by a lower-ranking priest, or maybe a trader with aspirations. It makes sense, just as we have everyday cutlery and fancy silverware. They had layers of utensil hierarchy, too. Historians still debate whether these gold tongs were only used for coca leaves or had broader ceremonial applications. Some were found near pigment bowls, suggesting they may have also been used in applying face paint or distributing powdered incense. One fringe theory even suggests they doubled as tweezers in burial preparations, carefully placing small charms on the deceased. Nothing says eternal rest like a well-accessorized corpse. You pick up one tong and notice a tiny sunburst etched into the handle. It's faint, but it's there. A sun symbol perhaps dedicating the tool to Inti the sun god. Or maybe it was just a maker's mark. Either way, it gives the object a heartbeat. And here's your quirky tidbit of the hour. One gold tong was found tucked inside a small woven pouch, alongside a hummingbird feather and a dollop of dried honey. Some believe it belonged to a traveling healer. Others say it was a child's toy. The contrast between sacred object and possible plaything is frankly delicious. You lean back on your heels, tongs balanced across your fingers, and let your thoughts wander. These tools are so small, so delicate, and yet they carried so much weight. Not physically, but symbolically. It makes you wonder how many things in your own life carry that quiet gravity, that sacred significance masked in simplicity. There's something almost intimate about using tongs this fine. No grabbing, no shoveling, just a gentle pinch, a moment of pause, a breath between motions. And maybe that's what made them sacred in the first place. The restraint, the precision, the reverence. You tuck the tongs gently into a groove between two stones. They look like they belong there, like little golden birds resting before flight. You stand and dust off your hands. The wind here is dry, and it catches the edge of your sleeve like a tug. Time to move on. As you walk away, the moonlight dances across the tongs one last time. You don't look back. You don't have to. They'll still be there, pinching sunlight long after you've gone. The mountain air grows still as you round a bend and find yourself at the edge of a hollowed-out basin lined with the remains of what was once a small village. Low walls encircle the clearing, like arms half raised for a forgotten embrace. But what draws your attention isn't the buildings. It's the pile of pots, dozens of them clustered near a crumbled hearth. You wander over, careful not to step on any fragments. The pots vary wildly in size, from palm size to nearly knee-high, each shaped from red or gray clay, some still bearing traces of soot. You pick one up, inspecting the lid, and that's when you hear it, a faint whistle. You freeze, look around. Nothing but wind. You tilt the lid again, and there it is, an airy little trill, like a bird catching its breath. You smile. Welcome to the world of coal home. Saw clay pots with musical lids. These weren't just containers. Some Andean pots were engineered with acoustic quirks, tiny channels built into the lid or body that caused them to whistle when steam escaped. Whether it was intentional or happy accident, no one knows for sure. Historians still argue about it. Some say the sound warned cooks when water boiled. Others believe the whistling served a ritual purpose, summoning spirits, blessing the food, or simply making the act of cooking more joyful. You run your finger along the rim of the pot and spot a carved pattern, a jaguar face mouth, open tongue curled, stylized, sure, but expressive. Maybe the pot was designed to sing like the big cat it depicted. You lift another lid, this one chipped, but still functional and tilted. A higher note this time, like a bird call. A little melody from a time long buried. One fringe theory even suggests these pots were tuned to harmonize, that a cluster of them boiling at once created a soft, overlapping chorus. Can you imagine a village kitchen bubbling like a symphony, each pot offering its own voice? The idea's romantic, sure, but not impossible. You dig deeper through the pile and find a squat vessel with a flattened top. At first glance, it looks unassuming. No carvings, no color. But you notice 3 small holes bored in the lid, arranged like the dots on a die. When you blow across them gently, yes, You try it out. Comes a breathy, triple-toned hum. Somewhere between a whistle and a sigh, you pause. That sound could lull you to sleep. You can picture it now, a cook alone by the fire, listening to their pot whisper. A child dozing nearby, soot smudged on their cheek. The tune not for entertainment, but comfort. And here's your quirky fact. One pot found near Lake Titicaca had a built-in rattle chamber. That's right. As you tilted the pot, little pebbles inside made a soft clatter like a maraca. No one's quite sure why, maybe to scare off pests, or maybe to call attention to a sacred brew inside. Either way, it's more musical cookware than your kitchen has. You pick up a broken shard from one of the musical pots and study the clay. It's coarse, gritty, thick, with bits of crushed shell and plant fiber. Functional, but far from fancy. And yet, someone shaped it to sing. That says a lot about what mattered to them. Maybe the act of cooking wasn't just practical. Maybe it was performance, ritual, communion. In the Andes, food and spirit were always intertwined. Feeding the body fed the cosmos too. You glance up, watching clouds drift past the moon. The air is so quiet, you can almost hear the echoes of old pots humming across the hills. You wonder if those sounds ever shaped dreams. If a child fell asleep to the whistling of dinner, thinking it was the mountain breathing through clay. You gather a few fragments and set them gently on a flat stone, arranging them like notes on a silent staff. Then, without a word, you step back, leaving the broken chorus behind. As you walk on, you feel a kind of resonance, like the vibration of sound that never truly ends. It's still there, tucked between the rocks and the night, waiting for someone else to listen closely. You keep walking, guided now by instinct more than path. The mountain narrows to a spine, and you follow it as if balancing along the back of some sleeping giant. Eventually, you reach another ledge, wider, flatter, almost deliberately leveled. You crouch down and let your lantern sweep across the stone, and that's when you see them thin, round objects woven from reeds and grasses, brittle now, but still surprisingly intact. Strainers, basket strainers specifically. At first glance, they look like the kind of thing you might hang on a wall as a boho decoration. But these had a purpose, and a surprisingly refined one at that. They were made to strain water broth, or, more intriguingly, infusions made from medicinal herbs. Some even filtered fermented corn mash during the chicha-making process. You pick one up gently and hold it to the light. The weave is tight. Really tight. Tighter than you'd expect for something handmade, without magnifying lenses or modern tools. It's so fine, in fact, that it feels like even sand might struggle to pass through. And that's the thing, these strainers were overbuilt. Woven so intricately that they could separate thick root pulp from liquid, or tease sediment from herbal tea. Probably a bit unnecessary for soup, but essential for ceremony. Historians still argue whether these were everyday tools or reserved for spiritual brews. Some were found in kitchens, others in tombs. One even turned up buried beneath a stone, carved with constellations, leading some to believe the strained drink was part of a star-watching ritual. And you've got to admit, drinking cosmic tea under an ancient sky kind of poetic. You run your fingers over one of the strainers and find a section reinforced with thread, bright red faded now, but still visible. A repair. Someone sat down and stitched it, patching their precious filter, rather than remaking it. That says a lot. Tools were valued here, cared for, maybe even named, if you believe some of the more colorful myths. And speaking of myths, here comes your quirky one. In some oral traditions, there's a spirit called Mama Miska, the weaver of waters, who taught early people how to strain the bitter words from river songs. According to legend, her basket didn't catch impurities, it caught lies. Drink what passed through it, and you'd only hear the truth. Fringe. Absolutely. Fascinating, even more so. You pick up another strainer, slightly wider, with a small carved handle. It's shaped from bone, probably llama, and fused at the edge of the basket to make pouring easier. It even has a small notch at the base, perhaps, to fit over a bowl or pot. You imagine the rhythm of use, pour, lift, tap, pour again. Repeated 100 times until the brew was just right. This one's scorched on one side, too close to the fire, or maybe it sat atop a hot pot during brewing. Either way, it tells a story of a hand that slipped, a fire that burned too hot, a night when someone was distracted or in a rush to finish before the stars faded. You sit cross-legged, resting the basket on your knees. It's easy to picture the old kitchens now half indoors, half open air, smoke rising in lazy spirals, a pot bubbling, someone leaning over, pouring slowly through one of these strainers, whispering a prayer as the last drop falls. Maybe they were making a healing tonic. Maybe it was for a birth, a funeral, or just a long winter night. And here's a detail you almost miss: a tiny charm tied into the rim of one strainer, shaped like a spiral. It could mean anything. Time, water, a path. You turn it over in your fingers, feeling its slight wobble. A charm to guide a journey, perhaps. Not across land, but across consciousness. Some of these strained drinks weren't for the body. They were for the spirit. Mild hallucinogens crafted with care, filtered through tradition and basket alike. You place the strainers back with reverence, like you're tucking away a page of music only a few still remember how to read. The wind shifts again, dry and low, and you swear it hums as it threads through the reeds. You move on quietly, the mountains watching. Somewhere behind you, the strainers sit in silence, waiting for the next brew. Or the next dream. The moon has climbed higher now, casting everything in a silvery wash. You descend toward a shadowed ridge, and the terrain shifts again, less cultivated, more wild. The stone path beneath your feet has given way to moss and scattered rock. You duck under a low branch, brush past a rustling bush, and emerge into a clearing moonlight, glinting off something pale and curved in the dirt. You crouch down. It's small, bone white, hollowed, and shaped like a tiny spoon. A chill runs lightly along your spine, because this isn't just a spoon. This is a snuff spoon, a ritual tool carved from condor bone, once used to deliver sacred powders during trance ceremonies. You lift it gently. The curve is subtle, the bowl smaller than your thumbnail. It was never meant to stir soup. This spoon had a singular, intense purpose: to carry powdered seeds, resins, or hallucinogenic plants up to the nostrils of priests, shamans, or vision seekers hoping to glimpse the gods or themselves. In many parts of the Andes, especially along the coast and into the highland borderlands, snuff rituals were common, even revered. Powders made from the seeds of Andean. Trees were ground fine and mixed with lime or ash. Then they were lifted carefully, reverently, by tools like this one, and inhaled sharply through the nose. A shocking sacred path to visions, revelations, or perhaps madness. Historians still debate whether these spoons were personal items or community tools. Some have been found in burials clutched in skeletal hands. Others were discovered in temples lined up in neat rows, like an offering tray. Some were exquisitely carved with condor feathers or jaguar heads at the ends. Others, like the one in your hand, are plain, utilitarian, but no less powerful. You turn it over and spot a tiny engraving, a swirl almost like a fingerprint spiral. A symbol for the mind, perhaps, or wind, maybe both. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some snuff spoons were designed to whistle when blown through, acting as both instrument and applicator. A sharp puff of air might have signaled the beginning of a ritual or announced the presence of the divine. One archaeologist even proposed that the sound helped modulate breathing before the trance began. Sort of a spiritual pre-game warm-up. You place the spoon back down and glance around. There's more. A second spoon flatter shaped from wood lies nearby. And a third, this one more ornate, has a handle carved into a spiraled serpent. The bowl of that one is stained faintly green, suggesting heavy use. Or perhaps a specific type of powder. Some substances like Vilca or Yopo left behind telltale hues that even time couldn't erase. And nearby, you find the case, a pouch made of woven alpaca wool, still loosely intact. It's small, just big enough to hold 2 or 3 spoons and a bit of powder. A shaman's kit, maybe. Carried close to the body, hidden from unworthy eyes. You sit back on your heels, letting the moment settle. The idea of this spoon traveling across centuries just to rest in your palm is weighty. It's more than just a drug tool. It's a key, a bridge. For someone long ago, it opened doors you can't even see. The wind picks up again, curling through the clearing, and for just a second, it smells faintly of ash and wildflower. Maybe your mind's playing tricks. Or maybe you've been here long enough to tune in to the lingering notes of ritual. You close your eyes. Imagine the scene, a figure seated cross-legged under a starlit sky. Face-painted eyes, closed, breathing slowly. The spoon rises. A powder pinched. A sharp inhale. And then silence, except for the crackling of a nearby fire and the whisper of distant ancestors. You open your eyes again and gently tuck the spoon back into the pouch, wrapping the flap closed with a single twist. You don't take it, of course. These aren't souvenirs. They're stories, still unfolding, even in sleep. You stand brushing the moss from your knees and glance back once. The spoons lie nestled in shadow, as if waiting for the next seeker brave enough or foolish enough to peer behind the veil. The terrain levels out again as you follow an old stone path toward what must once have been a ceremonial site. The stones underfoot are arranged deliberately too deliberate for farming too large for a house. You step through an archway where half the lintel still clings to life and find yourself standing in the center of a wide courtyard. All around you are the skeletal outlines of temple structures, their walls just tall enough to suggest grandeur. Moonlight bleeds through broken windows. You're standing in the ruins of a cloud temple, one of many perched on the uppermost ridges of the Andes. The kind of place where people believed the sky touched the world and that food could feed more than just flesh. And scattered among the stone's utensils, not many, but enough to be strange, you kneel beside a small bowl carved from translucent stone, likely spondylus, the prized blood shell of the Andes. Inside it rests a slender spoon, carved from dark polished wood, its bowl shallow, its handle inlaid with a strip of silver. It looks delicate enough to snap between your fingers, And yet here, it lies centuries later, unbroken. This wasn't for stew. This was for ceremony. Cloud temples weren't just places of prayer. They were stages for performance. Offerings were made not just with flowers or song, but with food. Carefully prepared, symbolically plated, and served with tools like these. A meal for the gods, arranged with the same care as a coronation. Historians still argue whether these utensils were used during specific solstice ceremonies or as part of daily ritual for the high priests. Some think food was placed before statues or sacred stones, then ritually tasted by an officiant before being buried. Others believe these tools never touched real food at all, only symbolic ingredients like ground corn coca or animal fat meant to represent larger cosmic concepts. You pick up another spoon. It's heavier than the last, made of stone and etched with an image of the Chakana, the Andean cross. The symbol is centered along the handle like a spine, flanked by tiny dot stars maybe. It's not just art. It's theology in utensil form. Here's a quirky detail. One ceremonial bowl, discovered in a temple near Cusco, had a built-in slot at the base of the spoon's handle, allowing it to stand upright in the bowl. Always pointing up, always ready to serve, even if no hand ever reached for it. A gesture frozen in time. You find a third piece, smaller, shaped like a scoop, but with an awkward curve too shallow to be useful, too thick to be efficient, likely decorative, or intentionally frustrating. Some researchers think these tools were meant to be difficult to use, that the struggle mirrored the effort of spiritual transformation, that every offering had to be earned, not just made. You sit for a while in the courtyard, surrounded by stone pillars and moonlight, imagining the temple alive. Smoke rising from incense pots, the hum of prayer, the shuffle of robes on stone. A bowl passed from hand to hand, the glint of silver catching the firelight. A spoon lifted not to taste, but to speak, because that's what these tools did. They told stories of gratitude, of fear, of longing. In Andean cosmology, the world wasn't just a place, it was a web. Every bite echoed through it. Every offering mattered. You glance up at the stars. The same stars these priests once watched. Maybe with bowls of sacred grains in their laps, spoons balanced across the rims like small bridges between worlds. You wonder what prayers they whispered. If they worried about their harvests, their children, their bones aching in the cold. And then you notice something else, another utensil tucked near a cracked altar stone. This one is unfamiliar. It's a double-ended spoon, two bowls facing opposite directions connected by a thin, hollow shaft. One end is polished smooth, the other chipped and rough. It feels like a riddle. Some scholars suggest tools like this were symbolic of duality, the central concept of Andean belief. Day and night, life and death, above and below. A spoon that fed two worlds, a tool that served no single purpose. You gently place it back, your fingers lingering on the cool stone. The temple around you is silent, but it doesn't feel empty, just resting, waiting for someone else to ask the right questions or offer the right meal. You rise, stepping over moss-covered stones, and cross the courtyard one last time. Behind you, the utensils remain silent servers at a celestial banquet. Their work done, their meaning still unfolding. The descent is slow now, not just because the slope is steep, but because your legs are heavy with hours of wandering through time. Still, something pulls you forward, a faint shimmer in the moonlight. Not gold, not bone. Shell. You find it half buried near a low wall. Where the wind has cleared the dirt, a knife blade sharp-edged and glinting pale lavender in the moonlight. You pick it up carefully. The edge has been chipped and honed into a crescent shape, and the grip is worn smooth. It's not metal. It's shell mother of pearl, possibly, from a giant Andean clam. This isn't an accident. This is a shell knife with a carved handle. And it tells you more than it probably meant to. The handle is a marvel on its own, shaped from dark wood, carved into a twisting figure, part feline, part serpent, with a tongue lolling out in a cheeky grin. You run your thumb along its grooves. It's stylized like something a craftsman would make if they were both highly skilled and slightly mischievous. It feels less like a weapon and more like an artifact someone wanted to show off. Shell knives weren't just pretty tools. They were common across coastal and highland trade routes, especially in places where metal was rare or reserved for sacred use. And surprisingly, shell holds an edge well enough to slice food or skin. You gulp. Okay, mostly food. Mostly. Historians still argue whether these knives were used in cooking or ritual. Some were found in domestic settings, others in burials. And then there are those that turn up in both, suggesting that the same blade that cut vegetables might later serve to prepare the dead. Efficient, yes. Unsettling, also, yes. You find another knife nearby, this one broken at the hilt. The shell is dyed red, probably ochre, and the handle is wrapped in faded fiber cord. It has the feel of something passed down, maybe tucked in a sash used often. You picture someone cleaning it nightly with salt water, whispering thanks before wrapping it in cloth. Here's your quirky morsel. One knife recovered near the edge of Lake Pupo was etched with a full sentence in knotted string quipu. Wound into the grip itself. Not just decoration, communication, a message embedded in a blade. The meaning still a mystery. Theories range from a family name to a warning to a recipe, or maybe just do not wash in hot water. You glance up and realize you're not alone. All around this low terrace are the outlines of dozens of tools, some arranged neatly, others cast aside. This was a workshop, or a market stall, maybe a school where apprentices learned the art of shell shaping, maybe a gathering place where elders traded blades, arguing over curve and grain and polish. You sit on a nearby stone shell knife, still in hand, and tilt it toward the sky. The pearlescent surface catches the starlight and throws it back in shy glimmers. It's easy to imagine this tool at a feast, cutting thin slices of tuber, maybe ceremonial fruit, maybe something rarer, passed from hand to hand with care, admired, used, cherished, and as you watch the light dance across its edge, you wonder, what stories did this knife witness? Did it stir laughter or silence? Did it cut too deeply once? Was it praised, blamed, lost found? You place the blade gently beside its broken sibling and spot one last oddity, a shell sliver notched at both ends. A blade, a pendant. Both in Andean culture, objects weren't locked into a single function. If it could hold an edge or a meaning or a prayer, it was good enough. You brush your fingers through the dust one more time, half expecting another face to appear in the dirt. But the terrace gives no more secrets tonight. You rise, stretch your aching back, and take one last look at the shell knives glittering in the dark. They're silent, sure, but not mute. They've told you their part. Now they wait for the next listener. The path now hugs the wall of a jagged cliff, winding toward a dark crevice just visible ahead. You duck inside cautiously, the air suddenly cooler, the silence absolute. It's a cave, but not just a cave. You shine your light against the wall and see them, shelves, carved directly into the rock. Staggered, organized, intentional. This wasn't a random hiding place. This was storage, or more accurately, an archive, not of scrolls or treasure, but of utensils. You step forward and find them nestled in the stone niches, arranged with care. A set of flat stone platters, stacked like vinyl records, wooden ladles with handles bound in faded fiber twine, tiny reed scoops tied with yarn now brittle with age. It's a domestic scene, but solemn. These aren't tools for daily meals. These are offerings for the afterlife. Welcome to the mummy caves, where the dead were provisioned not only with food, but with the tools to make it. Utensils left not just to accompany a soul, but to say, you'll need this where you're going. In the Andean worldview, death wasn't an end. It was a relocation. And the afterlife wasn't passive. The spirits ate, drank, watched, helped, haunted. So their tombs weren't sealed shut with silence. They were stocked with supplies. And not symbolic ones either. Real ones. Practical ones. You kneel beside a large basket sealed with hardened resin. Cracking it gently open, you find its contents almost perfectly preserved. A drinking vessel, 2 spoons, and what looks like a spice pouch. The faintest scent of dried herbs rises into the air, like eucalyptus or wild mint. The spoon is the most exquisite. Carved from bone, its handle shaped like a seated figure, possibly a god, possibly just someone very, very relaxed. The bowl is oval, worn smooth, and still dusted with residue. You tilt it, and the fine powder inside shifts. Maybe dried chili, or crushed shell, or simply thyme. Or historians still debate whether these utensil sets were made especially for the dead or simply drawn from the deceased's favorite tools. Some argue that fancier utensils implied status. Others suggest the opposite, that only humble tools were appropriate for the journey beyond. Because in death, humility was the passport, you find a smaller shelf, tucked deeper into the wall, with a single carved ladle resting in it. The handle is inscribed with a phrase in old Quechua faint, but legible, Ama Lula. Do not lie. A reminder, perhaps, or a plea, or maybe just the deceased's favorite kitchen rule. And here's your fringe tidbit. One mummy cave near Arequipa contained a bowl of chuño, the freeze-dried potato staple, and next to it, a ceramic knife, made entirely of ash. Compressed, fired, and shaped into a tool meant never to be used. A dream of a knife, a metaphor baked in clay. Because in the afterlife, maybe the idea of a thing was enough. You glance at the shelves again and realize that everything here feels paused, not buried. Like a kitchen wrapped in sleep. Tools not discarded, but preserved. The spirits they once served still lingering perhaps, still waiting for their next meal. You sit against the stone wall, watching shadows play across the carved niches. The air smells of dust and minerals, but also something softer. Something lived in. You imagine this cave glowing with torchlight long ago as loved ones quietly prepared the resting place. Maybe a grandmother laid her ladle down with shaking hands. Maybe a child tucked a scoop beside her uncle's wrapped form. And you realize these weren't leftovers. These were memories frozen in form, not because the dead needed to cook necessarily, but because the living needed to believe they would. You rise slowly, knees stiff from sitting on cold stone, and replace the items exactly as you found them. You step back, offer a quiet nod, and turn to leave. But before you do, you whisper a simple blessing to the shadows, not because you think they'll hear you, but because someone once stood here and did the same. The cave exhales behind you as you emerge back into the open night. The stars now seem impossibly bright, like holes poked in some ancient overused sky map. You're back on a ridge that overlooks nothing and everything. The valleys below are lost in shadow, but you know what's down there. You've felt it, seen it, held it in your hands. You walk the final stretch slowly, here where the rock flattens and the wind has carved deep furrows into the stone. Something stops you. A circle shallow, barely visible, a hearth, or perhaps a stage. Around it lie objects arranged with care, a flat platter of slate, 2 drinking vessels, and a single spoon laid horizontally between them like a bridge. It's not a coincidence. This was a setting, a scene, a statement. You step into the circle, you sit, and for a moment, you become a participant in something impossibly old. This wasn't a kitchen. This was a farewell, a final bite, a last breath, staged not for show, but for eternity. You reach out and touch the spoon. It's metal rare here, bronze maybe. The handle is shaped like a human hand, reaching forward, fingers outstretched, but never grasping. It's eerie. It's beautiful. It's intentional. Historians still argue whether these objects were part of an elite burial ritual or a communal rite performed for the dying. Some believe families gathered around such settings to stage a final symbolic meal where nothing was actually eaten, but everything was felt. A shared silence, a ritual of goodbye. You hold the spoon gently, as if it might crack under your breath. The bowl is still faintly stained. With what ash maze? It doesn't matter. What matters is that someone held this. Someone dipped it, raised it, paused, and never set it down again. And here's your quirky final tidbit. One high-altitude grave, uncovered near this region, contained a table setting for 3, but only one body. Scholars have theorized it was an offering not just for the deceased, but for those they hope to see again in the next world. A seat for the self, and 2 more for whoever was waiting on the other side. That kind of hope sits heavy and light. You return the spoon, laying it gently across the 2 cups again. A bridge, a memory, a question mark. You lean back, resting your weight on one hand, staring up into a sky that doesn't blink. Somewhere below, the wind stirs the grass. Somewhere behind you, a ladle glints in its dark alcove. Somewhere else, entirely, a golden tong is still poised, mid-offering, forever held in quiet service. You close your eyes, and for just a moment, the past pulls you in softly, like breath, like sleep. The air grows still. Your breath slows, and the mountains around you, so ancient, so weathered, begin to blur at the edges softened by the dark. You've walked a long way tonight, through ridges lined with baskets, through caves holding whispering spoons, through kitchens that fed the divine, and markets that never closed. You've held ladles that struck like weapons, tongs made of sunlight, strainers tighter than memory, and spoons carved to carry vision straight to the stars. It's strange, isn't it? How something as small as a utensil, an everyday object, can carry so much. Culture, faith, story, maybe even love. You don't carve a handle with feathers or paint a ladle with jaguar teeth unless the act of cooking means something more than food. These weren't just tools. They were prayers, protests, promises, and in holding them for just a little while, you became part of that. So let yourself rest now. Let your thoughts drift like smoke from an ancient fire. Let the story settle into your bones soft and slow, like warm breath on a cold hillside. The Andes will keep their secrets a little while longer, but tonight you've been trusted with a few of them. So sleep, deeply, gently, and if you dream, may it be of humming pots and feathered forks and one final meal shared with someone long gone under a sky that remembers everything.